Good morning, friends. Stephen Benoon here with Israeli News Live. This morning, we're visiting with Jolene, and Jolene is getting her PhD. She actually finishes this summer in Texas, and she is a biologist. And of course, her focus is in neurobiology. And Jolene, before I butcher all this, I'm going to have you tell me a little bit more about yourself to everyone and what your background is, what your focus of study is, things like that. Go ahead.
Yes, hi, Brother Steve. Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, so I am studying, I've always loved science. I'm studying biology with a neuroscience concentration or focus. I work with mice, and my research is actually about oligodendrocyte development. If anyone is familiar with diseases such as MS, they're demyelinating diseases where the myelin sheath is damaged. And so the cells that produce the myelin sheath are oligodendrocytes. And so I'm doing a developmental study on looking at cilia, which are parts of the cell that help to sense the environment, and the incidence of cilia as it correlates with oligodendrocyte development and maturation, as well as another pathway that promotes oligodendrocyte maturation. And so we're just looking at all of that and the implications on demyelinating diseases such as MS. So I love that. And most of all, I love the Lord. And I feel
Yeah.
like, he's the author of science. And so I am
Yes.
very blessed to be able to study and to look at his beautiful creation.
Well, let me ask you a little bit about MS, multiple sclerosis, for those that may not know what that is. And um, uh, what my question is in the study that you guys are doing, the research that you're doing, is this also like, as you study this in science, is it looking for things that might help those individuals by looking at the mice there to overcome some of these dreaded illnesses that people get?
Yes, absolutely. So I right now am focusing more for developmental study to look what happens in development to kind of see how we could translate this into human research. For particular patients, we were looking at a particular disease called tuberous sclerosis, which is also similar to MS, but it can have applications. Of course, my research can have applications for MS. And so what we're doing is trying to look in development to see when are the cilia that the cell has are lost. Cilia are hair-like extensions of the cell, and they are very crucial to sensing the environment. Like they have a lot of receptors on them that the cells use to sense the environment and to perform signaling transduction. And so in the mature oligodendrocyte, they are lost. And in the mature oligodendrocyte, there's another pathway called mTOR, which helps to also promote myelination. And so we think that the cilia kind of restrains mTOR in the sense that there's a reciprocal relationship where when cilia are present, mTOR activity or mTOR signaling tends to be low. When cilia are not present, mTOR activity tends to be high, and that's what tends to promote the progression of the maturation and the differentiation of the oligodendrocyte. It might sound like a lot of fancy science terms, but the end goal is to see at which point those two converge, as in when the cilia are lost and when mTOR starts to signal, to then be able to translate that to find cures or to find drugs that could help to target that. Because typically, what happens in demyelinating diseases, um, typically mTOR tends to be hyperactive, like too much mTOR signaling, and cilia also tend to be lost. So we're trying to we especially are focusing on trying to target the cilia because my lab focuses on cilia in the brain, like in neurons,
Right.
oligodendrocytes, and astrocytes. My project specifically focuses on oligodendrocytes, but we're looking to target the cilia because there are drugs that you can use to then promote lengthening of the cilia and stuff like that. And then that will help with overcoming the hyperactive mTOR, which tends to lead to a lot of the defects that you see with like multiple sclerosis or myelination, and
What
that
about
kind of thing.
cystic
So that's
fibrosis? Is that another one that's affected by this?
Mhm. We don't, well, that's a good question. I don't believe cystic fibrosis has anything to do with oligodendrocytes,
Okay.
but um, I
Let,
wouldn't be
let me
surprised if
digress. Let's go
cilia play
back.
a role.
Let's go
Oh,
back
sure,
to
sure, sure.
the part about what you were saying here on the cell there, and it's got like these little
Mhm.
hair-like things that are on there that are what do
Yes.
the signaling. And I
Yes.
find that fascinating because it's basically like the little cell goes ball-headed. And now he
Basically.
can't feel anything, right? So now listen, all
Right.
right, Jason and Todd, if you're listening to this broadcast here, we're not picking on you, brother, right? Here's why I say it though. This is going to sound strange, but do you know that in some ancient cultures, it is believed that the hair on the human body is also got receptors. In other words, it has the ability to pick up its things in the environment. I don't know exactly what, but it makes me kind of think too, where Paul says, a woman's hair is her glory, so. Now I know that it
Yeah.
matters. Like if women are losing their hair, that really becomes a problem. So
Yeah, I recently had to cut my hair.
yeah,
So,
and that's
but it's
okay.
still
There's nothing wrong with cutting your hair, but
right.
I just find this fascinating because if human beings, and I don't know if that's hypothetical or what it is, why these traditions ever believe that, I don't know, and I don't even remember which tradition where I heard that at. I just heard that one time.
Okay.
In fact, when I first heard it, I thought, "Gosh, I'm going to grow long hair, man. If it's really some kind of signaling ability, But there again, like I said, I don't know if it's just some kind of
No, no,
strange idea.
no.
But
No, but the cilia, because they're like hair-like extensions, they have a lot of receptors on them. And so the receptors are, or what we call in science, the ligand or the molecule that binds to the receptor is then able to produce a signaling cascade of reactions
right,
from that interaction there. And so the cilia are really crucial in that sense for sensing. And like if you delete, like there are many experiments that have been done to delete the cilia like embryonically, like during embryogenesis. And in those experiments, they actually you cannot have a fully functioning animal that's produced. Like usually that ends up becoming like lethal, like where there will be like a spontaneous abortion. Like you cannot produce an animal from without any cilia because it's that important. You
right.
need it to for patterning, for like it's so amazing, Brother Steve. Like in embryogenesis, a lot of like there's a lot of signaling that happens to kind of like produce the body patterning, like what goes where, the orientation. And so you need a lot of signaling molecules, and the concentrations of those molecules kind of determine the patterning of the organism. And so cilia tend to be crucial for that process as well. So they're very, very important. And
Yes,
they were thought like by scientists to be just like evolutionary remnants. But of course, they're finding out that it's so important. It has a vast array of functions. And actually, as you talk about cystic fibrosis now, what's coming to mind is that I don't know about cystic fibrosis and cilia particularly, but there is a disease called polycystic kidney disease where cilia tend to be lost from the cells. And so cilia, in that sense, they are able to sense the flow of substances in the kidney. And so, like, and I think the loss of that then causes the cystic kidneys to form because there's too much mTOR signaling, because mTOR promotes growth and all of that. But which again, in certain
It's
contexts,
really
you
got
want that,
right.
but
So we find that these little things play a major role in
major
the
role.
human body to
Yes,
be able to function properly. Now, you shared with me a
absolutely.
little while back a video that Mike Adams did with I don't know what type of scientist he was, but or if he was, exactly what he does. But is there any relationship between that interview there and some of the things that you're sharing with me now?
Between that interview and what I'm doing now in my research,
Right. In other words, the interview that maybe kind of you can kind of just tell us a little bit about the interview that Mike Adams did. And I forget the guy's name that you told me that was on there.
Jonathan Otto.
Jonathan
Yeah,
Otto. Yeah.
Jonathan Otto. Mhm,
Yes.
mhm.
So tell us a little bit about that interview that he did there.
Yes, absolutely. So with my lab, um, my segue, I guess, into knowing about photobiomodulation is I had heard about it because my lab, we did a collaboration with another lab. I didn't do major work on the project, but I just helped train the girls in the immunofluorescence techniques that we use. And because they were interested in using photobiomodulation as a means of treating, I believe it was epilepsy. And they were using lasers to help with that. And so that's how I had heard about photobiomodulation. Um, and so with the scientist that was on Mike Adams, I think his name is Jonathan Otto. He talks about red light therapy, which is basically falls under the big heading of photobiomodulation. Um, with red light therapy, I think the wavelength is about 600 and in the 600 range of the spectrum. And I believe well, it's very powerful, of course. Like a lot of people have used it in saunas and that kind of thing, or with red light devices, the LED devices that help
Right.
with producing collagen, with promoting wound healing, all of those things. It has tremendous benefits on the body. And the interview with Mike Adams was highlighting the fact that you could use red light therapy along with a photosensitizer in order to treat cancer, which I was not aware of that.
Oh,
But
wow.
it's brilliant. Yes, but it's brilliant what he talked about. But when I then thought about it in the context of photobiomodulation and with life wave specifically, the life wave patches, they produce, so red light therapy uses, like I said, light in the range of the 600 nanometer range of the spectrum.
Right. And I
Um,
think David uses 680 or 82, something like that nanometers. That spectrum there
right,
is right where he's at. Something to that effect. I
right.
maybe have that exact wrong right now, but I was trying to find my notes on that when I did the
Oh,
video
you're good, you're
on
good.
the Hebrew about it. But go
And
ahead, continue on, please.
yes, but the patches, so they're in the red area of the spectrum. Now you have the infrared part of the spectrum, which I believe has a greater depth of penetration because it starts to get into the 800 nanometer range of the spectrum. And so there is the ability to then penetrate the cells, of course, at a much far greater depth, and that promotes even greater benefits to where the red light therapy, I believe, is more of a of a so sorry. The red light therapy is more of um a surface level. I believe the patches go to a much greater depth because it's taking the body's light that's produced like by that you can see like through night vision goggles, and it's then reflecting it back into the body at that wavelength. And at that wavelength, you can then start to affect the mitochondria. You
But
can,
let me,
sorry,
before
go
we
ahead.
go, I want to go into that much deeper, but let me just kind of share with
Mhm.
people a little bit about the reason why I wanted to interview you a little bit about this subject to begin with, and your studies specifically with these little cells that have their little hairs on them there that are reaching out. Because in your study, MS, multiple sclerosis, is one of the things that you guys are focused on. And one day we were having a private conversation and we were talking about this, and you mentioned to me that you mentioned MS to me, and I don't remember which patch it was that you were actually thinking about, but you were looking at the science behind this. And I know there's testimonies of people with MS that have talked about this, but I guess the best way I could say this, this is nothing to do with cells. This is dealing with science. This is just looking at scientific from a scientific view of just
Mhm.
what theoretically we might say here for our interview's sake, but theoretically, this could really be a benefit for people that suffer with that. And so continue on, because that's what really caught my attention, because I've had people reach out to me before and say, Steve, will this help with MS? I'm suffering with MS. And now I'm
Mhm.
learning more about that from you guys' study in the lab, how it works in mice and things. And so it's very fascinating to hear this. Go ahead.
Yes, absolutely. And I'll also touch on with Mike Adams and Jonathan Otto as well, but specifically for MS. And of course, like as a disclaimer, this is not medical advice, so
Right.
they have to follow up with their doctor. But just when you know the mechanism of the patches and how they work, like it could be a potential wellness tool that they could use for them. Because the way the patches work is that they actually um, they're basically combining two things. Like they're combining both the benefits of, well, I'll say they're combining both photobiomodulation, which in and of itself is really powerful, using light as a means of healing the body or promoting healing. So they're using both that, and the patches themselves also elevate the level of a copper peptide, GH-KCU, which if you read in the scientific literature has tremendous benefits for regeneration, for wound healing, for basically resetting the genome. And so if you combine those two elements, that combo itself is really powerful. And what happens is that the mitochondria can be optimized, like mitochondrial function can be optimized or enhanced. And if you look at a lot of diseases are resulting from basically mitochondrial dysfunction at some level. And that's really usually the cause of aging as well. So the mitochondria are huge and are very crucial because of oxidative phosphorylation and because it's the powerhouse of the cell. It produces energy, and you need proper functioning mitochondria in your cells to be able to for your cells to function properly and optimally. And so if you can basically enhance mitochondrial function, you can then cause a lot of diseases to improve the prognosis or even get to be reversed because of just how powerful that is. Because your cells need energy to be able to perform their functions, and the mitochondria are, the powerhouse of every cell in the body. And so, in the context of MS, if you can then promote mitochondrial function in MS, then that will help with the symptoms. Like they'll feel because of the ability to have for the cells to produce more energy, because actually the what David says too when he talks about the patches is that it promotes the energy, like the flow of energy in the body and that kind of thing, which is huge. Like science is only touching the tip of like how crucial that is. And so it's just because, like I said, of the mitochondria, if you can enhance its ability, then because the key to that too, Brother Steve, another point to bear in mind is that um, because inflammation is at the root of a lot of diseases, usually that results from poorly functioning mitochondria as well. If you can get it to function optimally, then that will reduce inflammation and, of course, reduce disease, or the prognosis of disease, I should say. So, all that to say, targeting the mitochondria, which is what the patches do, is really crucial to helping with inflammation, helping with optimizing cellular respiration, which again is going to do wonders for actually being able to help with any disease in
Well,
the body. Like,
let me ask you
so.
this, because you mentioned about like
Mhm.
inflammation, and that was one of the things too. I know that there are a lot of case studies out there, especially, and I've read some of these case studies there where they talk about people, for example, that have stem cells injected, and they're doing it now for Alzheimer's in the brain. They're injecting them, they're putting them in your back. They localize the stem cells, whether they come from a donor or whether they spin your blood down and use those stem cells to help promote healing and stuff. But one of the big issues was inflammation. They talk so much about in these case studies that I've reviewed that
Mhm.
that when there's inflammation in the body, it hinders that ability for those stem cells to really go to work and do the repair that they need to do. With that being
Mhm.
said, and with the ideology as we look at injecting stem cells versus this technology that David Schmidt developed, X39 as it's called, um, what are the differences that you see scientifically between those two?
With injecting versus
Right,
actually,
using
yes.
this
And
patch
so
that is placed
which is a
on,
patch,
right.
right? And so yes, so yes, and that's one of the major benefits of the patches too. There's so many, like on so many levels, the patch is able to promote proper bodily function, whether it's from the mitochondria, whether it's from GHK itself, which can help with the genome, um, with resetting the genome and promoting optimal function.
So
To
if I
also,
understand right, in other words, if you're injecting the stem cells into the body to and no doubt many times that's help people, but it's extremely
Mhm.
expensive. But when you're
It is
injecting
extremely
it,
expensive,
it's
yes.
not raising GH-KCU in the body, such as what this patch
Right.
is designed to do.
Exactly, exactly. So I think with because the GH-KCU is itself what is causing the promotion of or the activation of the stem cells. Um, Whereas I'm not sure if all the mechanisms involved in like the injection of stem cells, but I would imagine that it is local for sure. Like that's definitely one thing because whereas the patch would be systemic, so it would go, to anywhere that's needed in the body. And also, I believe from just when you inject something locally, typically like the cells, if there's a lot of like inflammation and stuff like that at the area, that's probably going to also cause the stem cells to die or to not perform optimally. And so with the patches, with both things being taken care of because what you'd want to do ideally is to promote stem cells and to reduce inflammation because the presence of inflammation will prevent the stem cells from being able to
Right.
actually differentiate and to go on to actually go into the mature cell type. And so
And of
if
course,
you have
the
a high level,
Eon patch, in this case here, is
exactly,
about Eon, which reduces inflammation, which I had actually found
right,
myself.
right.
I didn't know this in the beginning about that until I heard David
Mhm.
talk about these case studies, and then I started researching them for myself. And
Mhm.
then I noticed if I put an Eon near that location that has the inflammation at, and I reduce the inflammation, I got better results as a result of that. And you've also mentioned a patch called Alavita. Now, according to
Mhm.
what the company says, you can't wear them at the same time. You'd wear the Alavita at nighttime because they
At
cancel one
night.
another out.
Right.
But if you can tell us a little bit about this Alavita, what does this thing do besides Eon? Maybe even and discuss a little bit about Eon. What is it raising in the body? Because I know every patch that he's designed is using an organic material, and that material
Mhm.
is elevating something in the body that
Mhm.
causes those effects. And I think that's why it makes everything systemic, because when you raise those, like the GH-KCU in the case of X39 and X49 raises another copper peptide, but the different peptides that are elevated naturally are elevated throughout the body, which I assume that's what makes it more systemic. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. So basically what happens with because you're raising the levels and your body has like an innate intelligence to know where to go and what's needed to be repaired. So so elevating the levels of the GHKCU it can go anywhere in the body, and then that can then promote the stem cells, the differentiation and activation of stem cells. And so or I should say activation and then differentiation of stem cells.
Right.
And so yeah, so if you so promote so elevating that level has that systemic effect. Whereas like we talked about before with local, you might not get you'll just get a local effect rather than a systemic effect. And also
And
I
you're
was
not
reading the
lowering
other
the
day too.
inflammation either with a local
Right. And
injection.
you
That's another problem.
Right. Exactly, exactly. And also from just like I said, it's so multi-pronged or multifaceted in its approach. It's really elegant, beautiful design because the light therapy aspect too on its own can produce a lot of healing effects in the body. And so even just photobiomodulation itself without even like factoring in the copper peptide portion, but just photobiomodulation itself is able to, like I was reading in an article, like a research paper on it, basically, even if you direct it to a certain area. Like light signaling can affect anywhere in the body and it can affect distant tissues, even ones that are further away from the site of application. And so that's why it's so powerful too, because people probably think, oh, if I'm just putting the patch on like just my neck, or is it going to affect anywhere? But because of the power of light signaling in that way, like it can affect distant tissue. So it's not just restricted to that local area as well. So
Right. And
yeah.
I've actually seen videos, and I shared that with people one time before, where they're using a laser therapy on the skin, and then somehow or another they were able to record the cell underneath. And I don't know if this was animated or it looked realistic, but the cell literally almost like reaching out towards that light. It reminded me of a plant.
Mhm.
When you put a plant in a room, it gravitates towards where the light is, and our cells are doing the
Mhm.
exact same thing. Do you know
Perfect.
how Eon actually works? I'm curious about Eon. How does Eon actually work, the
Maybe.
patch itself? What is
That's a
it
good question.
elevating?
Yes. Yes. So Eon, I believe, and I don't know, I don't think, I know David sometimes keeps his stuff like private, but I believe from what I understand, it elevates it elevates a molecule called DHEA, which helps with anti-aging, and it's a stress reduction type molecule. And so that I believe is what Eon is doing. So it promotes an anti-inflammatory effect on the body.
Right.
Yeah, so that is a particular molecule
My
that it
wife
elevates. And if
makes me
you
take DHEA because she says that's why
mm,
you can't stay awake. So you need to take 100 milligrams a day. And I never really thought about it, but if you think about it, now that I think about it, when I'm wearing Eon, those are
mhm.
the days that I don't feel like I'm going to fall asleep.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah, yeah.
now, Jason talks about that it helps cut cortisol levels in the body. I don't really understand what
You're
that
right.
means. What is that? And that's why he's lost so much weight. I'm down to 190. I was at
Mm,
almost 200. I
mhm.
think I was at 218 pounds. Now, of course,
Wow.
granted, I got off steroids as well. Don't have to use steroids any longer.
Mm,
So I'm almost completely
mm.
med free now. Um,
That's
but
amazing.
yeah, and that in itself, people talk about, well, this thing might be a little expensive. X39 is going to cost you
Compared
$1,200 for
to,
1 year. 1 year,
right, compared to having to be on like all these medications and
right?
insurance and yeah,
Now,
yeah.
so, but in the case here, that DHEA, that's fascinating in itself. But the cortisol, what does he mean by
Yes.
cuts the cortisol levels?
It probably because cortisol is more of a stress hormone. I believe DHEA, since it's anti-inflammatory in nature, is going to reduce that or maybe counter the effects of cortisol in the body. And so I don't know a whole lot like of the specifics of the mechanisms of DHEA, like how it signals, but that's what I would imagine. Like actually I'm just like seeing it right now. Like because it's anti-inflammatory, it's going to basically reduce your inflammatory cytokines. It's going to help with your immune system. It improves gut health. Like there's a lot that it does
Wow.
because I know it's like a major anti-inflammatory molecule. So,
That's amazing. That's absolutely amazing. And then aloe vera, I
yes.
know you did some research on that, so I'm going to ask about that. And I won't ask about no more today, but
Oh,
we
you're
can come
okay. You're
back and we'll
okay.
talk about more of these in depth as well. Next time, maybe we'll talk more about X49, maybe
Sure, sure.
SP6. I
Absolutely.
mean, this company, look, and I wanted to do this interview today with Jolene because a lot of you just that listen to the channel, will sometimes I'll mention at the end of there, or maybe I'll share some testimonies. But she's so brilliant, and her mind and understanding the patches, and really from a scientific standpoint, we see the benefits, especially. I always tell people commit a year. David says a month for every decade of your life, but I tell people commit at least a year. And normally, if you commit a year, you're not going to want to stop anyway, because, and as you said to me, Jolene, it's not, some people do. You're a one patch wonder type thing. But you've told me this is something that gradually affects
Yes,
and helps the
yes.
body and helps the body to get better. I mean, it took you decades probably
Absolutely.
to get in your condition. So think about it
Mhm.
like that, but still, what could
Mhm.
happen in a year's time with people? And I'm
Right,
going to say real
right.
quick before we get to the end of the broadcast, too. My email will be here in the description. If you want to talk to Joel and you were curious about this, but you don't really know, and you really got some questions that we've not discussed here, and you'd like to talk to Jolene, I'll put you in touch whether you can ask her yourself some questions, maybe or concerns that you have, and maybe she could help you on that. I know we don't say that the patch heals, but the patches are elevating things in the body naturally using this
Mhm.
photobiomodulation therapy that
Mhm.
really is making a difference. And I wanted Jolene to come on because, you know, I don't need to sell products. I don't need to do this. This is not my ministry is not focused on that. I have no need of that. Um, you know, but I see that this really helps people. Really, genuinely, it has helped a lot of people. And so that's why I asked Jolene if we'd come on. Let's talk about this, especially because one day we were talking about patches and you mentioned that this may benefit people with MS. That really caught my attention. And I've known people
Absolutely.
that
It
are
can.
wearing it for that reason that are doing better. They've reported that they're doing better over
Mhm.
time. I think one lady said
Mhm.
she's already
Mhm.
60% improvement. And
Mhm.
when you
That's
said that, and
amazing.
then hearing you
Oh,
talk about your
absolutely.
studies,
Yes, and it's beautiful because like one thing that I don't think I mentioned is the fact that oligodendrocytes themselves are very susceptible to like changes in the cell's metabolism, which all ties into mitochondrial function and the generation of reactive oxygen species, which also leads to inflammation and that kind of thing. So again, if you can enhance the mitochondrial function of the oligodendrocytes, that is huge, which of course, like I said, are the cells that are affected in MS. And so that is definitely like huge for helping that. So
So,
and not only that,
and just from what you can see in your own studies, it'd be wonderful if maybe they would allow in the lab and what you guys are doing to start putting a patch
I
on
know,
one of these
no,
mice and see
it's
if it
so
makes a difference.
funny. I know, like my advisor, she's amazing. I love her. But we've talked about the patches because she's known that like, the difference it made in me and with arthritis. But I think for her, um, she's not fully convinced. Like a lot of scientists are more very highly skeptical.
Right.
And so, like, I've sent her the information and, said she could try it and she was considering it, but I don't know. Like, I showed her the GHK literature and all that stuff,
Well,
but she
Dr.
hasn't
Tesla
yet
has shown
committed.
us, yeah, Dr. Tesla, a 40-year
So I don't want
veterinarian,
to push her, but
yeah, he's shown, you know, over and over patients of his the family members chose to use it, especially in life-threatening issues of these pets because they were so old. They would be 15, 16 years old. He knew that the pet was not going to live much longer. And he's recommended several patients, look, I can't say it will, but I feel like you could benefit from using X39 for your pet. And they ordered it not for
it's
themselves,
at
for
least
their pet.
mhm.
And he's
Right,
had
right. And
case
it's at
after
least a
case
toolkit.
after case where the pet
Yes,
recovered.
yes, yes.
So,
Hmm.
yeah, I think it's an
Yeah, it's at
amazing,
least something that you could use in your toolkit
yeah,
to help you, as just like one of the many things that you're using to help your body to heal and
yes.
to be restored to like wellness, to a state of wellness. And so
I
and I'm
like the way
happy
you put
to,
that, Jolene. It's just one thing you can add to the toolkit because
yes.
you can't replace, like, for example, vitamin C, good vitamins that really work in the
Mm,
body, not just something that's
mhm.
stuck with a bunch of fillers that people offer. And I don't necessarily
Right,
know what the
right.
best are. I rely on my wife to always
Mm,
tell me, no, you should use this versus that, etc. So I'm
mm.
very, very excited about this. And for me, I'm excited
Absolutely.
about the
And
educational aspect.
yes, and also the fact that it's not just like over time, like we talked about, like gradually, because of, like I said, the many facets in which the patches work. Um, because of that, like you have so many benefits. Like you have the benefits that are derived strictly from photobiomodulation. You have combined with the benefits derived from the copper peptide. And that also then the copper peptide is what promotes your, like I said, your stem cell activation and differentiation. And that especially is huge because that's what's going to promote long-term healing and regeneration of the body. So, in essence, that will over time improve the prognosis and also with time even reverse any condition.
Amazing.
So not just masking it,
Thank
so
you.
but actually
Yeah.
reversing it. So
Thank you,
yeah,
Jolene, so much for coming on and sharing some of these insights today. Listen, if you want to know more information,
absolutely.
just go to the description. I'll have the information there. And if you'd like
And
to,
I'll say one more thing
yeah,
too. And I'll say one more thing too. I I know a lot of the scientific mechanisms, but even if there's something that I don't know, because of my background, I'm happy to look into it and to share more. And so I'm just happy to help in any way that I can and answer any questions or anything like that. So
thank you so much, Jolene. And you had a
absolutely.
rare form, is it arthritis, I believe, right? Of your body? Is that right? Of the spine or something?
Yes, like it's very atypical for my age because of the fact that I'm in my 30s and it's really advanced for this stage. And so I was already almost to the end stage I was right the stage right before end stage of disc degeneration. And these patches have really helped to reverse that and to turn that around. Because they said that if I didn't attack the degeneration like really heavily, or if I didn't like really treat it seriously right now in my 40s, I would have a lot of pain and onwards. And so they, I did a lot of like holistic stuff, which was helpful, but hands down, like the patches have outperformed all of those treatments. And of course, those treatments have their place. But like just the benefits that I got after 3 months of therapy, I felt like I still needed to continue going for quite a bit, whereas the patches have really just within that time, just within the same time frame of 3 months, like have well outperformed the traditional therapy. And so it's just
That's
been a real
amazing.
blessing because it was really hindering me from being able to fully perform to really fully perform my daily tasks, like looking into the microscope and all of that, because of course, like it's neck arthritis, and your neck basically is always in use
Yeah,
because it,
yeah,
stabilizes the body and the posture and all of that. So you can never, whereas if it's your hand or your foot, you can rest it, but your neck is never at rest. So it was always being aggravated to some degree. And so the patches have really helped with that. So, and
that's
it's
amazing.
really helped me to regain, my daily functionality. And so I'm really thankful. So,
Amazing. Thank you. Anyway, all right, guys, thank you for listening. And like I said, if you want to reach out, I can get you in touch with Jolene directly. She could maybe help answer some of your questions there. We thank you for watching today. Stephen Benoon and Jolene with Israeli News Live.